Good morning, everyone. This is a special Budget Committee meeting. Budget Committee as a subcommittee of the Ways and Means Committee. We're here to discuss the tentative budget and provide we legislators with the opportunity to ask questions and provide comment to the budget officer and the county treasurer. If you would join me, please, in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, if you'd conduct the roll call, please.
Thank you. Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Curran?
Here.
Mrs. Burdick? Here. Mr. Fanton?
Here.
Mr. Ricky?
Here.
Mr. Stockin?
Here.
Mr. Crandall? 6 present.
Thank you. Okay, so we all have been provided with the budget, and we have Carissa and Terry on hand to answer any questions. I guess to start right off, does anyone have any questions or would like to get the ball rolling?
My question is, why are you not going?
I don't know. I noticed that, though. Yeah. I guess I'll get the ball rolling, if that's all right, Terry. Can you talk a little bit about the use of fund balance in this budget? How much is budgeted and from what funds?
Yes. If you look at the summary that was provided in your budget, both in the detail that I gave you and the summary that Brenda gave you, if you look at the bottom of the page, there's an appropriated fund balance line. Excuse me. We were able to review the fund balances that were in other funds, and some of them have had a substantial amount of fund balance. The most significant one was in the medical insurance fund that we have, which is the CSH fund. As you know, that really uses about a little over $8 million from our general fund that we push over to that fund every year to cover the medical insurance for our employees. When I looked at the appropriated fund the fund balance that was available to use towards the 2022 budget, I was able to extract about $1.2 million from that fund, and that reduced what we had to send over there from general fund. So in addition to the CSH fund, we took some money out of county roads fund balance as well, $750,000 out of that to cover the price of almost 2 bridges. And road machinery, there was $200,000 that we pulled from fund balance to cover some equipment. There was $50,000 left in the debt service fund that when there's money in debt service, you have to use it against debt service. So we appropriated $50,000 from there. And then our risk retention, we normally use $250,000. That's been funding itself for several years now, knock on wood, Brenda. And that reduced our amount from general fund that we needed for fund balance to balance the budget to $2.25 million. So overall, we're using $4.75 million of fund balance for 2021. Our total last year for our 2021 budget was $5,324 million out of various fund balances. So we're using less overall and significantly less out of general, about $2 million less out of general. But that's because we use some out of other funds. So if you were to compare the 2021 summary to the 2022 summary, you'd see that difference in what we were using from other funds to support that, the expenses out of that. Does that answer your question, Chairman Harris?
It does. Thank you. So if it was the will of the board to amend the tentative to provide a larger tax rate decrease. We could do that by increasing the amount of fund balance utilized in '22.
Out of general fund, yes.
Yeah. Any questions for Terry on that? I don't know why it's echoing, I'm sorry.
I will note that there's a significant amount of money in the contingency for 2021. We have about $1.8 million. It's a little more than $1.8 million, might be 1.9. That's in the A 1990.429 account. That is, let me pull the, I can tell you what page that's on. If you wanted to look at it literally, that's kind of what we've used the appropriated fund balance for in general fund, was to support the increase in the contingency account. That is on page 7 of the budget from Brenda, the summary budget. And we have $1.85 million in contingency for the board to use during the year.
Ms. Root, did you have a question?
I do have a question. I'm going to question you, Chair of the Budget. What are your ideas as far as how much you want to decrease property taxes by using the fund balance? And if we're having that discussion, can we also enter into a discussion on using that fund balance to help increase revenue for the county by putting some of our fund balance into economic development for the first time in a long time? And so I think those two discussions need to go hand in hand. I don't have a problem decreasing property taxes, but I also think we need to talk about how we can put some of this money towards increasing tax base here in Allegheny County. Thank you.
Thank you. So to answer your question, as much as how much to lower the property tax rate, as much as fiscally responsible, as much as we can, and to remain that way. I think a majority of the money in contingency, but Terry can fix me on this, is earmarked for investment in economic development. Is that right?
That is correct. Because of the conversations that the board has had regarding economic development, Chris and I felt that we should put at least $1 million in there for the projects that you have discussed. That's why we upped that contingency by that amount. It can be used for anything during the year that you want, but because of the projects that you had discussed, we felt that it was important that we get some money in that budget for the economic development, restructuring, whatever it is that you want to do down there. Anything else that you want to do as far as larger projects, then we would just have to appropriate from fund balance to do them during the year.
Terry, isn't it also possible to take the unappropriated general fund balance and assign some of that by resolution to specific purposes and not restrict it, but by resolution say you're going to commit in the future to appropriating out of that portion of general fund balance towards a project?
Yes, you can earmark fund balance. We have a policy in place, and you can assign, restrict, or commit. We have done that before. We did that for several years. Under a previous administration, we put aside $1 million a year for 3 years or whatever to build the balance up for closing of the landfill. You can do that. We've done that before, and it's not, it's in our policy that we can do that. So you could take unappropriated fund balance and actually commit that or assign that to a project.
So I just want to go back. I think there are three mechanisms to maybe look at economic development and how this county could use some of our funds towards that. One is the contingency, which we built into next year's budget to have some money set aside in the budget to spend. Two, you have or will have by mid next year $8.9 million in ARP funds that could be used towards projects. And three, you have a very healthy unappropriated general fund balance. You could look at not appropriating it so much in this budget, but assigning it by resolution towards economic development, a portion of that, whatever I think would be within what Terry's recommendations on fiscally responsible would be. So those are three different avenues you could take at looking at moving money towards economic development.
Do you have a follow-up, Deb?
Well, we've talked about this, and if you put it in contingency, I really think that we need to lock some in, I guess, going forward, instead of just saying, oh, yeah, we have $1 million in contingency. I would favor the resolution if we could come up with that dollar amount that we have targeted, earmarked, and we can plan on that money, and something else isn't going to come in and swoop it away like it could. So I'm glad to hear that stuff, but I think we need to have those discussions and come up with that and come up with a resolution moving forward. So that's my comments.
And,
If I could comment on that.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, my comment on that would be that any kind of assignment or commitment can be done anytime during the year. It doesn't hinge upon the budget. What our goal was to put some money in there so it doesn't hang you up when you want to try to start spending that money. That means that that money's there. It takes a simple resolution from the board to appropriate that to economic development or wherever you want to go. It eliminates the step if we have some money in the budget for you to do for preliminary things, be it engineering or studies or whatever, that money is already allocated. For the future, then that's probably going to be a larger sum of money. So then that would be where we could do it anytime that you decide to do that during the year in 2022. And it doesn't hinge upon the adoption of this budget. So we were trying to be proactive and put, X amount of dollars in there, and then at the same time, look at what we could do for the future. And yes, the use of fund balance is always there to be able to use for those projects.
And I appreciate those efforts, and I think we're on the right track by doing that. So thank you, Terry.
Yep, you're welcome.
Mr. Healy?
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Mrs. Root. I think probably the best way to reduce our property tax rate is to grow our base. Not only are there a lot of other additional pluses by doing so, positive growth, not pork, but it will increase and lift everybody's boat in all our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ricky?
I think we need to lock it in like Ms. Root would like. Congratulations, Deb, on the election. I think it needs to be locked in so the people coming here to do business know we mean business. It's not, oh, yeah, we can come up with it. It's right there, readily available. Just, that's the way I think we need it. We've been way too long.
Thank you. Carissa, this is probably a matter for P&D, right?
Probably a matter for them to look at, but I think Terry was going to look up something, because I think my recollection is that you can pass a resolution that assigns money towards economic development in general fund, but it's not actually appropriated to the budget until you want to appropriate it. So you could assign it a purpose, take a specific amount under general fund balance, it's unrestricted, and put it into an assigned purpose.
But that's a totally separate resolution from whatever budget amendments we make
Correct.
for the 22.
It's a separate process.
Right, so it should go through P&D, right? Okay. Okay. I think, Deb, I think we're all on the same page. We're all in agreement, so.
If you didn't hear that, P&D could request it, but they would need to go to Ways and Means. They would be the appropriate committee for that.
Okay. Okay, so Carissa, can I ask you to talk about the ARP money a little bit and why it's not in this budget?
It's not in this budget, and that was based on consultation from the auditors that we have, as well as the accounting consultants that we hired specifically for ARP monies. So we received half this year, we'll receive half next year, for a grand total of $8.9 million. We have until 2024 to commit those monies towards a project, and by commit means you would need a resolution and a contract to do those services, and you have until 2026 to spend on those commitments. So really, what you'll be doing over the next couple of years is every time you have a project you want to spend ARP monies on, whether that's one project or several, you'll be doing a resolution to appropriate that money into the budget for that specific project. And the recommendation of both the auditor and our consultants, for specific consultants for ARP, is that we don't put that into our budget until we actually have the projects and the resolutions lined up for commitments.
Okay, any questions on that? Terry, can you talk a little bit about where you landed with sales tax projections for '22?
Yes. We looked at sales tax, and we obviously are being conservative on the sales tax. We increased the, actually, I'm gonna have to look it up before I talk. We increased the sales tax projection, I wanna say by over $1 million, or just about $1 million. Considering where we landed at 2020, and where we are in 2021. Because it's still so volatile with that last payment, you just never know where we're gonna be at the end of the year. But we felt we could add $1 million in there comfortably and, reach that goal. And not hit our budgeted amount, but have that. So we increased that. In 2021, we had a budget of 22.5, and in 2022, we're recommending a budget line for that revenue of 23.5.
In your discussions with other counties, is that pretty close to what most are doing? Just a small increase?
Yeah, we looked at the actual of 2020, and we had about 23 million, just under 23,050,000, I think it was. So, we felt that, we could raise that a little bit for 2022 without going, way above that and not meeting that budget line. We didn't want to overestimate it and get stuck. And we still, have to take into consideration the diversions. The diversions are still there. We haven't gotten any notice that they're gonna stop those diversions. Obviously, it's questionable whether they're gonna continue with the distressed hospital one, but there's been no decision made on the state about not taking that from us. The aim is still questionable. We're locked into the amount that they've been taking from us. There's discussions that are off to the side about whether they want to increase that. If they increase it and don't take it out of us, then or don't take that diversion away from us, we're gonna pay more that way as well. But I think that's kind of quiet. I haven't heard too much discussion about that, but obviously we know that that's still gonna continue for a while.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Any questions on that?
Not on that.
Go ahead, Ms. Burdick.
I had a couple questions. Let me see. The first one would be starting with page 6 for the Board of Elections. We have, under amended, 2021 amended budget.
Jan, can I interrupt you real quick? Are you using the condensed version or the big one?
The
For the
budget
detail.
officer detail.
Okay, thank you.
So anyway, we've got amended budget figures, but there's no record of anything ever received, ever spent out of those.
Are you looking at page 6? Yeah, I guess I need to know what page.
Yeah, page 6, A1455.3089 EVE and .TIER.
Those are revenue line items on
Right.
page 6.
Yep.
That's the New York State Board of Elections Early Voting Expansion Grant. And the second one is the New York State Board of Elections Technology Innovation and Election Resource called TIER. They are grants that we received in 2021. They amended that budget for $17,173 for the grant for early voting, and they amended the budget for the technology. Those have not been, we have not claimed any expenses on those as of yet. That's why you're not seeing anything for 2021 as far as the actual amount.
But we did get the revenue?
We did not get the
We ha-
revenue
okay.
yet. No, we have
Okay.
not gotten that yet. But if you were to look on their expense line, let me look back here to 1455. Let me just check real quick. On page 53 is the expense lines that go to that. You will also see that there has been nothing charged this year as expenses. It is most likely a grant that expands over a couple years. So if they don't get all the expenses in 2021, then we'll be reappropriating that in 2022 and they'll expend it then, and then we'll get the claims. But right now, we've just been awarded that grant. That's why there's a budget in there, but nothing's been spent or received on those two grants.
So those grants were only for the 1 year?
I don't know for sure. I'm thinking that they're an overlap, but if they aren't an overlap, they've got to spend that by 12/31 and claim it. So they still have a couple months. And they may very well just not have gathered all the information to put the claim in or spend it all yet. It doesn't look like they've hit the grant for any expenses either. And these were run as of 10/21.
Okay. So on all of the actual amounts received, I assume that is through 10/31? That's not an estimated amount that we'll receive through the end of the year?
No,
For
the
revenues?
actuals are through the date I ran this, and these
Okay.
were actually run on 10/21.
So that's why a lot of those revenue accounts don't show anything because the money hasn't come in yet?
Correct.
Okay.
Or a claim has not been made. We run on a modified accrual basis, so once a claim has been put in, we can recognize that revenue. So we might not have received the cash yet, but you'll see a revenue amount posted. So,
One other question I had was on page 16 under the jail. It shows under federal prisoners, the revenue, and it's gone up significantly. Do we know, are we expecting that many more federal prisoners?
well, if you look at what we've received through October of this year, we're at $713,000. So in reality, there probably has not been a bill yet for the October prisoners. So if you add in October, November, December, we're likely to be closer to those budgeted requests that the sheriff had. Because I know we have been getting more prisoners
Okay.
in the last few months. So he's anticipating that we'll be at like 985. In 2020, we received 875. And, I'm guessing this 713, I can certainly look it up, Jan, but I think this 713 is the billable hours through September.
Okay.
So we probably still have 3 months left in the year. Okay, but that's the estimate that was given to us by the sheriff's department.
And I think the other question I had was on page 59 under COVID. We don't have anything, is that because there's no more grants for COVID after this year? We didn't budget anything.
Right, the COVID is a grant, and so we will not budget for that until we get awarded another allocation. So what you're seeing is what was allocated in 2021, and we don't know what we can anticipate for 2022. But once we know, then the department who gets the COVID will come in and say, we need a budget adjustment to accept this money, and then we'll appropriate it then.
And one more.
Yep.
Under New York State retirement, there was over a $1 million decrease. Is that pretty accurate, based on what your estimate from New York State retirement is?
Correct. When we put in the estimate for the department head level, we were anticipating a large increase in the retirement system, because that's what we were all, we didn't have the estimate yet. And then about a month later, the estimate came in, and it showed a significant decrease because the market had such a good turnaround by March 31st. So our estimate came in a lot less than what was anticipated, so we just deducted that all off the.
I just thought that should be made mention of because it is such a huge decrease. And
Yep.
usually New York State retirement is always increased. So
Right, and that
it's-
was based on, if you'll remember correctly, the market kind of was at a bad spot for March of 2020, and we took kind of a hit. And then that recovered by March of 2021, so there was a significant decrease in that estimate.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome.
Any other general questions? Ms. Ricky?
Yeah, and it's the other one. I don't know if I even switched it and put it in here, but it's the number one draft. Guess it's page 4 of 23. It's A3110. Telestaff Workforce Kronos for the Sheriff's Department, $20,000. That's on page 4 of 23 on the department head request. It's 20, we signed a contract back when Mr. Boyd was here. He was our lead chair when we had the sheriff's contract. I mean, it didn't finish up with him. We finished it, but it's in the contract that they will go with whatever time system we want. So why are we paying 20 grand here when we already have a time system?
So Telestaff isn't a time system. Telestaff is their scheduling, it's their wheel. And the module we bought for, our time system is time and attendance, we'll call it that, executive time and attendance. Had a module to do a wheel for scheduling that didn't really work ideally. They were still building it out. It was a fairly new product. It wasn't working when our original Telestaff, we had an old version, expired. So we, last year, decided to renew Telestaff and upgrade it to a current version to see if time and attendance, executive time could mimic that. As of right now, executive time has not been able to mimic the wheel in the same way that Telestaff has. So my recommendation is that we continue on with Telestaff as the wheel. They still have to do time and attendance. They still have to do their time cards for time and attendance. We are attempting to get Telestaff to work with time and attendance so it's easier on all of our staff, but we haven't worked out all the bugs on this.
So the company that sold us this, I thought when you brought it to us a while back, somebody, I think it was Carl, even asked, will this work out at the sheriff's department? I think we were sold, yes, it will.
Well,
That's all.
I
Do we
think
need a rebate back from the company?
that's something we're looking into, and I'm not entirely sure that it will never be able to work. But right now, it's not quite the same as what the sheriff's office feels they need for scheduling.
So maybe they overpromised us then.
I think at the time, they didn't quite understand the sheriff's office needs, yes. So these are things we're still working out, and if, in fact, that executive time can never do it, I would be looking at getting a rebate from them, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Chris, can you talk about, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jan.
Sorry. Under capital funds, I might have missed it, but did we not budget anything for bridges for next year? Are there no new bridges?
No, there are bridges in the capital fund. Let me just get to the page. They are like 3197, I think it is. Let me just maybe it's 3120. It's actually 5120. It's on page 163. Oh no, I'm looking at the wrong one. That's I flipped back to the one John was looking at. Let me go back here.
It's 153.
153? No, I'm looking, yeah, are you in the capital? Capital is 153. The page is 163 of your detail budget. And it's in account H 5120.2, and we have $1,800,000 in there. Once the budget is approved, Justin will come back with the projects that encompasses, and then we'll set up separate capital projects for each one of those. Right now, we have just $1.8 million in there for the projects that he anticipates he's going to bring forward.
And the Friendship Shop is a totally separate.
Correct. The Friendship Shop is not in your budget. We did make adjustments in the 2021 budget for the engineering studies. So those were all paid for out of the 2021 budget. And based on that second study that he'll have a dollar amount. And then we'll come back and then the board will decide if they want to fund that or not. And we'll have some options on how.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, can you talk about the time frame to adopt the budget from here on out?
Just give me a second, I'll pull up my little
Okay.
cheat.
While she's doing that, Terry, can we use the ARP money towards capital projects like that? Like the
Towards the
shop?
friendship shop? Yes, we can. Mhm.
So for right now, we have a budget hearing scheduled for next week. That budget hearing would have to conclude by December 20th. We are fairly early with our budget hearing, as we are every year. And you have to adopt a final budget by December 20th. If you fail to adopt a final budget or fail to amend the tentative budget, then the tentative budget as it is currently written will become your final budget. So the board has over a month to think about this.
Terry, so don't you usually come with some housekeeping amendments for us?
Yes, and I do have a couple of them. After we distributed the tentative budget, a couple departments were concerned about the cuts we made, so they've made exchanges. So I have a couple of those to make between now and the time you adopt a final, but they're very minor.
It doesn't impact the overall decrease.
Does not impact, it's an equal exchange of dollars, so that's what we're working on with them.
Ms. Root?
So looking at this budget as it is now, and going back to your original statement, Brooke, if we adopted this budget, what would it mean to our taxes?
If you adopted the budget today, as it is written, it would be a 1% increase in your levy. So the levy from last year to this year went up $299,181 from what you had for a taxable levy last year. Because of the difference in assessed value, the assessed value from last year's taxable assessed value to this year's went up about $25 million. So even with the increase, you are looking at right now, a 3.7 cent decrease in the tax rate, which is about a 0.26% decrease in the tax rate. So your rate will go from 14.63 cents to 14.59 cents about. Now, that's the average tax rate, Carl, yep. I did attach in your detailed budget the spread of the taxes, so you each know what your tax rate would look like, even though the average is the $14.59. The assessment, the equalization and assessment sheet in your budget shows you what the rates would be for each town. Phil did ask me a question last night about what the changes to the levy would have on the rate. For every decrease in the levy of about $25,000, you would decrease the tax rate by about 1.2 cent. So a $100,000 tax levy decrease would result in a decrease in the tax rate of an additional 4.8 cents. So just to kind of give you some perspective on that, $25,000 is relatively a penny. So for every $25,000 that you reduce that tax levy by, you're going to reduce that tax rate by a penny.
Mr. Stockton?
Or for every $25,000 of
Yeah.
additional funding that you bring in,
Correct.
does the same thing. But the other thing to think about, when you talk about right now, it's like 3 cents there. If you have a $100,000 property, that's $3. I mean, psychologically, it's a decrease, but in reality, it's hardly much. But that's the way they've been running, so.
Any other questions on that tax rate levy? If the board decided to do a little bit more to reduce the rate, Terry, you said it would be a straight pull out of, or an increase in what we allocate from fund balance, right? At this point?
Well, obviously, that's one option. I mean, there are other options within the budget if you wanted to decrease spending in anywhere or increase spending in anywhere, that will have that will have a different net effect, but, increase revenues somewhere. If you felt that there were some other additional revenues that needed to be increased, those could all have a different effect on the levy. But ultimately, an increase in revenue and a decrease in expenses, either one decreases the levy.
So last year, didn't we decide to add the revenue from timber sales?
Correct.
And also, didn't we adjust your sales tax estimate up? I'm trying to remember.
We actually increased the sales tax revenue during the year by that $750,000 after we knew the result of the previous year.
But we didn't do it as a budget
We didn't-
amendment?
We didn't do that
when-
750 as a budget amendment. We did that during the year and added that to added that to contingency.
So we left sales tax alone last year.
I believe you did. We might have increased it $100,000, but I don't have that right in front of me.
Well, I'd be interested to hear the opinions from the board about whether or not we should try to decrease the rate a little bit more than is shown in the tentative. Ms. Root?
I think if you're going to have those discussions, we need to talk about how we're going to decrease that rate. Are you going to take it out of the budget, or are you going to somehow increase revenue at the same time?
Mr. Graves?
Well, we have a healthy fund balance from what I've just heard. How would the board feel about taking a little from that healthy fund balance to decrease taxes? I know we're getting chewed up in the press for having a fund balance. Apparently, somebody knows how much it is, and they're broadcasting it around. I don't want to name names, but I think it would behoove us to try to decrease taxes. I think the new board would start out on the right foot with the right intentions.
In recent history, Terry, year over year, and maybe it's in here, I'm not sure, our fund balance has been increasing. Can you, like, ballpark how much it typically increases year to year, like, recently?
While Terry's looking that up, our fund balance is increasing, and isn't there a rule of thumb that we need to have 6 months of available money in case we needed to go there? And our costs are going up at the same time, so I think we need to look at all of that.
I believe it's a quarter. I think it's 3 months is what Terry usually has recommended, but
Actually, it's 2 months, but you're close.
I didn't know.
I didn't
This
know.
is the fund balance analysis from last year. So this was done in May, and it was after we had closed the books for 2020. And if you look at that, we had assigned $4.2 million towards our 2021 budget. That left us some unappropriated fund balance, pretty healthy, obviously. When you take everything out of that, and you leave 2 months for the rainy day in case we didn't get any money, and if we had to function and pay our bills for 2 months, and this is very small, I apologize, I can't hardly see it, we would need about $22 million. So if you take that off our unappropriated fund balance, at the end of last year, we, in my opinion, could have played around with about $11 million. That's what I think we had available to appropriate to other things, and obviously use some of that for our 2022 budget. Last year, we finished our budget, oh my gosh, We finished our budget, our general fund budget with revenues of 90.5 million and expenses were 87 million. So we put back into fund balance last year $3.3 million. That's what we did for 2020. You know, and I have all the ones if you wanted to know what we did for 19. I can tell you for 19, we only added $824,000. So it varies, but, you know, some years are obviously better than others. 2018, we added $2.6 million.
And Terry, how important was that healthy fund balance in 2020 during COVID?
Well, that's really what kept us running without having to depend on other funds to do that.
And how did other counties fare, do you know?
They dipped into that because they didn't have any. You know, they kind of weren't able to, in some cases, pay their bills as well as we were because they didn't have that cash laying in the bank.
And some counties had to borrow, is that correct?
They had to borrow money. They had to borrow RANs and TANs, which are revenue anticipation notes and tax anticipation notes, to be able to cover their bills. So we didn't have to do that.
And just one final note about, because I think it is, you don't want it to be too large, but it is important to have a healthy reserve there for a rainy day, because rainy days do come. How did that help us also when we refunded our bond and making sure we had a great bond rating too?
It did. We were in great shape to refund even during the pandemic. Most people were not going out and trying to refunding a bond during a pandemic. They were trying to get money, and we were just trying to refund it so that we could save some money. So, yeah, we were in great shape to be able to do that. I will say that the fund balance, it is healthy at this point. I think the board as a whole has a lot of things on its plate that we can use that for without having to borrow. I think, you know, you've got the friendship shop on your plate, you've got economic projects that you want to do, whether it's infrastructure or whatever for economic development, and we actually have the ability to combine funding sources between ARP, our own money, and, you know, and hopefully get some of that stuff that you guys want to get done. You know, so I think we're in good shape to look at the options of how to fund some of that stuff using that fund balance, Carl, as part of that funding option.
Mr. Healy?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, we are held hostage to many outside forces that are beyond our control, that we don't know what they're going to be going down the road, going forward. We don't know what the economic picture, both of locally or the state or the nation as a whole. I think we don't know what the state will do as far as their mandates. I remember back to when they first came out with their 2% cap. They had us up with a 2% cap, and I think they raised their mandates 11% that year. And I've heard there might be some other mandates out there that might be coming from the state. I think it'd be prudent to maintain the current budget and not reduce our tax rate any further. I'd rather see us invest some money in economic development, which would bring in, instead of spending our money to reduce the tax rate, I'd rather see us invest our monies to perhaps bring in more growth and more revenues to the county. That's just my words.
Thank you. Mr. Graves?
Terry, we've taken a look at the, there was a tobacco settlement. We received some money from that. Obviously, we don't know what it is until we get told that we're due that money. But there's other settlements that we've talked about, the opioid settlement and all those. Are those revenues included into this?
The tobacco settlement is always included in our budget. We put about between $750,000 and $800,000 in there. We have not budgeted for the opioid settlement, and we have not budgeted for the tribal monies that we were getting that they cut off. We have not budgeted for that yet because we are unsure if that's going to be settled and get either one of them. So we have not done that. Once we get notification of that, that certainly is an option that when we put that in our budget, that you can appropriate that to spend as well. So when we get notice of that, we can do something with that budget-wise.
And how about the pilot payments? I know there's some delinquent properties, and the last time I saw a list, there was $2 or $3 million worth of revenue that was owed to us in back taxes or pilot payments that weren't being made. Have we taken a look at that list and tried to develop a strategy how to handle that?
The pilot payments, we put in what we are anticipated to get for the current year. So based on their schedule, I think this budget contains about $85,000 in pilot payments that are the county share for 2022. The delinquent pilot payments, obviously were budgeted in the year they were supposed to get. We were supposed to get them. So any payments we get on the delinquents fall right to fund balance when we get them. We don't budget for them because we don't know if we're going to get them or not. We budget for them in the year that we are supposed to get them. But we do keep a list. We've had several payments on them. They're not as bad as they used to be, but there are still some that hold a balance.
Do we have a strategy for, I mean, when's enough, that kind of thing? Do we max out at some point that?
Well, right now, what we do, what our process is, that we're in communication with IDA. So IDA will go out to those that owe us money, and they will, actually say, when are you going to make us a payment on that? They have been able to establish a payment plan with a couple of them so that we get a monthly or a bi-monthly payment from them, so they are reducing their delinquency. There is one, if you'll remember, that we're still waiting for partial settlement. We were supposed to get that second settlement on that particular one back in May, and we have not received all of that yet. So IDA is working on some of those. I can certainly update you at some point on where we are with those.
And it's important probably to note that a settlement is because we sued the place that wasn't paying the pilot. Just talking to them didn't work, so we did file a lawsuit against them. Yes.
Correct.
And just a note, Terry mentioned the tribal monies. We have not been paid any of that since the first quarter of 2016. And if the state ever does settle up and we are able to get our tribal money, we're looking at about $1.25 million right now that's owed to us if we were to go with the same formula.
I was just trying to shake the bushes, see if there was some revenue out there we could use. I really like the idea of reducing the tax rate. Doesn't have to be a lot. It sends a signal to the public that we are trying to maintain expenses. The fund balance, the concept that we have to have 2 or 3 months worth of money set aside in case all of our revenue stops. I was a town supervisor and a mayor, very happy that we had a fund balance. It always came in handy, as Mike said. Sometimes you don't know what the state of New York is going to do. They hit you with a bill for retirement or whatever it is. It does hurt. But you and I both know that if a crash came, that the banks are going to close immediately, and there won't be any fund balance, that kind of thing. So I understand being careful, but carrying around $20 million, I'd rather see a fund set up for disasters. We have a better chance of having a terrible ice storm, or the only thing we haven't had is an earthquake, I guess. But they're knock on wood that doesn't happen. But I just, in my heart, I think we do the next board a favor starting out on the right foot. But I end my case. Thank you.
Thank you.
So looking forward, if the board doesn't really know what they want to do right now, you have the public hearing next week where you get an opportunity to hear from the public and their thoughts on the tentative budget. And then you can do the same thing that you've always done, which is if you have any changes you want to make, you do a resolution amending the tentative budget prior to adopting the final budget. And you'll have up until December 20th to do that. And I didn't look to see where December 20th falls in your meeting calendar, but that's December 20th is the statute date. So realistically, whatever your board meeting is prior to that.
Okay, so refresh my memory. So someone would, if they wanted to propose an amendment to the tentative, they would make a motion to that effect? Or would it just be through the process of a meeting, it gets added to the list of amendments.
Well, to actually make it easy on the county treasurer while she's putting the budget summary together, it would be nice if you had a meeting and you threw out the adjustments that you'd like to see made, and then I would be able to go back and make the adjustments and see where we landed as far as the tax rate prior to you adopting the resolution. You could put forward things, we could test them, we could see where that makes everything land, and then put together the proposal. That's what's normally happened. There's been suggestions made of changes. We put together the list, we present the list to the board through one of the committees, and then you adopt the changes for the final. It's committee of the whole, yeah. Usually it's committee of the whole, isn't it, Brenda? The adjustments? Okay.
But if there's one particular item that's distasteful to a majority of the board, it could wreck the whole resolution, right?
Correct.
So it's best to have at least general consensus before that resolution comes up, right?
Yeah, and in the past, that's been done in the committee of the whole.
Okay. Did you have something, Mr. Ricky?
Yeah, just back when Carissa and Terry were talking about relying on the fund balance that we had, which everyone's glad we did, that other counties didn't have any. How far down did we dwindle our fund balance? Did we dwindle all the way down to 2 million, or do we dwindle all the way down to 32 million? You know, where do we lie on that?
Well, actually, we don't touch fund balance during the year. We just use that cash. So we wouldn't have ever touched fund balance because we didn't ever dive into that. We use that cash from fund balance basically to fund our bills when revenues weren't coming in. So when the state was delaying payments or they were cutting the 20%, that's what we were using the cash for. So there is a difference between fund balance and actual cash. But the cash is what we had that some counties did not have.
Terry, have we had 3+1 come in here? 3+1s are consultants cash vest that help us manage liquidity and really helped us to have that good cash flow. Have we had them come in and talk to the board?
I'm not sure when the last time they were here to discuss our quarterly cash vest. I think I brought one report this year, the cash vest report, and we discussed that at one of the meetings. But for them to actually come in here, I don't think they've been here in a couple.
That might be a good presentation for the board. Because it is kind of difficult to explain. They have a lot of nice charts and graphs when they do it.
Ms. Root?
So can we go over the timeline again? When is the public hearing set?
Next Wednesday.
So we have the public meeting, hearing, we listen to the public, and then we come back in a committee of the whole and discuss our final changes. Is that that's the process for us?
That's the traditional process that the board's always taken. There is another process where Ways and Means could write a report to amend the tentative budget, and that could be incorporated into the tentative budget prior to public hearing. But to my knowledge, this board has never done that.
Well, I think it makes sense that we have a public meeting, hearing, and hear what the public has to say, and then come back together and talk about that and move forward from that.
Mr. Stockin?
Yes, sir. I'm with Carl on a lot of this. I'm in favor of taking a good chunk and lowering the tax rate. But what I'm not good at is predicting the future. And I never want to go down so much that then you got to turn around and think about raising it again. I don't like that strategy, but when you look at $100,000, it's in this budget. We're usually talking taking $1 million or $2 million, and $100,000, raises it another or decreases it another nickel. So you can add up pretty quickly to something that looks like something. At least I can save enough on a right-sized property to go to McDonald's or something. But it's a signal. So I'm in favor of trying to do something that way.
I just think that there's room to do both. Continue increasing investment in economic development, and lowering the rate. Something to talk about.
And I think Terry and I, as your budget officers, have built you a tentative budget that meets all the needs of our operations. And, you know, we've hit some decreases in there, and we've left the rest for the board to really think about. Because you could continue to decrease taxes through appropriating from fund balance into your budget, or you could be looking at using fund balance in the future for larger projects. So those choices are yours.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Healy?
Yeah, I'm, go along with whatever the majority wants to do there, and lowering the tax rates, always a worthy endeavor. And the only thing we want to remember too is that does affect our cap, our 2% cap, how much, if I'm correct, how much we can, if need be, down the road, how much you can raise taxes.
Terry?
That's correct. The smaller the levy, the less the 2% increases in your annual rate of increasing your levy. For instance, this year, actually I have it here somewhere, but can I find it right off the bat? The 2%, I was looking for the 2%. The allowable 2% on this current budget was about $593,000 is what we could have increased the levy. Obviously, we only increased it $299,000, and that had a decrease of the 3 cents, or almost 4 cents. So if we'd have doubled that, you would have, we wouldn't have been able to come in with a lower tax rate per thousand. So leaving the levy below the cap allows us to continue to have a decrease in the tax rate. It is a correct statement that as you keep lowering the levy, your 2% becomes less. We are fortunate enough that we haven't had to rely on that levy to get all our money for our operations and our services, because we have been able to use fund balance that we've had. We've had a healthy fund balance to be able to continue to keep that levy lower than the cap. There is a calculation for the tax cap that allows you, if you don't use it all in 1 year, you can have a rollover. We've always had a rollover. We've never had to initiate that use of that rollover. So we've been pretty good. The problem with our county, and this is just the dual side of the knife, I guess I'll say, is that while we are interested in staying under the cap, our biggest concern is the constitutional tax limit. You know, we are always riding that top part of that limit. And in order to do both, we can't afford to use our entire increase in our levy, because that puts us way over the constitutional tax limit. So to find that balance, we can't do both. We can't use the whole 2% and not expect to go over the constitutional tax limit. So we ride that fence. Every year we have to look at both of those. So that's what Chris and I do, is when we put the budget together, we have to stay within that constitutional tax limit, and it always uses less than what we could have raised the levy by, just to be able to keep within that.
And the consequences of going over both of those, you have a brief summary of that? Because I know it's
The
very
brief
long, but
summary
brief.
is, if you go over the 2%, you obviously got to pass a resolution that says you can go over the 2%. The constitutional tax rate, or tax limit, is if you go over the constitutional tax limit, we have gotten the letter before that has said you have exceeded the cap by X amount of percentage, and you are subject to possible decrease in the state aid that you will receive from the state of New York. So that's what you're always running up against.
Ms. Hopkins?
So my question then is, how do we manage that constitutional tax rate to get it within a reasonable percentage? You say we're always at the top of the level, and sometimes we've been over it. So how do we get into a safe area there in terms of our budgeting?
Well, history has been that we have always ran right at pretty much the cap. Some years we're below the limit. We're like in the 70s. Some years we're in the 90s. It all depends. What helps us generally stay within the limit is when we pay for our own projects. So every time we put cash in our budget to pay for our own bridges, to pay for our own equipment, that is an exclusion on the constitutional tax limit. And we've been good about that. So that keeps us right around hovering at the 80%. But it all depends on assessed value as well. So when Deb's talking about investing in your community and your base, you know, any increase in that assessed value helps us on that end as well. And any reduction in the levy also helps us.
And can I just say, Terry's been here for a very, very long time, and congratulations to her on winning again. Big relief for me going forward because she knows what she's talking about, and putting together a budget is not for people that don't know what they're talking about. So I'm very, very grateful for her expertise and knowledge. Because as you can just see, that's the very simple version. It's actually a lot more complicated than that, and we are always where we need to be. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Okay, we're running over. We do have other opportunities to talk about this down the line, but does anyone have anything? Yeah.
I just have one more question, Terry. The tax sale, is that going to happen anywhere in the near future? And, because I know that's revenue that we're not getting.
Okay, the tax sale. You know, a victim of the pandemic is all I can really say. Currently, the foreclosure moratorium is through January 15th, 2022. What we have done is they have allowed us to proceed with a document that we have to send to everyone that is delinquent, and it's a hardship letter. So the courts have allowed us and have come up with a form that our tax foreclosure attorneys have prepared, that has gone in the mail at this point in time. So we are pushing forward. The goal is, I have a draft RFP ready for an auctioneer service. So when I get that completed, I'll be bringing that to the board to ask to go out on that. I think I already have permission, but I want to come back and do that again because I got permission last year, I think, to go out for RFP, but I'd like to bring it forward again. And then we'll go out for an RFP. Once we get that, those quotes and stuff in, we'll be able to make a determination on that. And then the goal is that we've set a final redemption date for January 31st, 2022, hoping that the moratorium will be lifted and we'll be right in line to start moving. We're going to have a short turnaround if we can do that. We'd like to hold the auction in March. And be able to move forward. And then in 2023, we will do 2 years at once because the one action is going to get an extra whole year. So we should be able to push forward. We're hoping to have one maybe in March of next year. We did put that same amount in for the budget for 2022. Obviously, in 2021, we aren't getting any of that revenue, so.
So if you're able to move forward with an auction in March, what you're actually auctioning off would be the properties that we would have auctioned off in 2020.
Correct. They are the 2018 delinquents. So I'll remind you, though, that I came forward and you guys allowed me to extend the actual owner reacquisition program that the board has in place, and we've been able to still take payments. We have not stopped people from trying to save their properties or pay their payments, which has helped us in the end because we've gotten less parcels. But we're hoping to get that going, and 2022 will be the first year we'll have an auction in a couple years. So that's the goal. You're welcome.
Okay, good. Motion to adjourn, please. Mr. Ricky, thank you. Seconded by Mr. Curran. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. Thanks.